What if I told you that the most dangerous person in a mafia boss's life wasn't a rival gang leader, wasn't a federal agent, wasn't even a betraying lieutenant, but the woman who slept beside him every night? The woman who whispered, "I love you," into his ear as she plotted his murder? This is the story of Marco the architect, Valentino. A man so powerful that entire city blocks trembled at the mention of his name. A man who trusted no one. A man whose paranoia kept him alive for 2 decades in the deadliest business on earth. And yet, he trusted her, his wife, his soulmate, the mother of his children. He also trusted his dog, a massive Cane Corso named Nero, who never barked. Not at intruders, not at enemies, not at anyone. Until one night, when Nero's silence was finally broken by the most horrifying betrayal imaginable. This story will destroy you. It will make you question everything you think you know about love, loyalty, and trust. It will break your heart into pieces and then shatter those pieces into dust. But before we descend into this nightmare, I need you to do something. Subscribe to this channel right now, hit that like button, and comment below. Tell me where in the world you're watching from. Are you in New York, London, Mexico City, Manila? Let me know, because you're about to experience a story so intense, so devastating, that I want to know who was brave enough to take this journey with me. Now, let's begin with a man who thought he'd seen every form of betrayal, until the one that mattered most. Marco Valentino earned his nickname the Architect, not because he designed buildings, but because he designed the perfect criminal empire. At 45 years old, Marco controlled every major vice operation in New York City: gambling, loan sharking, protection rackets, drug distribution, and human trafficking. But unlike the stereotypical mob boss who ruled through brutal violence and fear alone, Marco was a strategist, a chess player who thought 12 moves ahead. He didn't just break the law, he rewrote it. Marco owned 3 judges, 17 police captains, 2 assistant district attorneys, and a city councilman. His legitimate businesses, a chain of restaurants, several construction companies, and a waste management corporation, generated enough legal income to explain his lavish lifestyle while providing perfect cover for money laundering. His organization ran with the efficiency of a Fortune 500 company. He had a CFO who managed the books, an IT department that handled encrypted communications, HR protocols for recruiting and vetting new soldiers, performance reviews, pension plans for retired members. Marco had transformed the Mafia from a thuggish street gang into a sophisticated criminal corporation. But sophistication didn't mean softness. Marco had personally killed 18 men. Not in fits of rage or heat-of-the-moment violence, but calculated executions carried out with surgical precision. Each death served a purpose. Each murder sent a message. When a rival boss named Tommy the Butcher Marconi tried to muscle in on Marco's territory, Marco didn't just kill Tommy. He killed Tommy's 3 brothers, his uncle, and his most trusted capo. Then he attended Tommy's funeral, placed a white rose on the casket, and whispered just loud enough for the grieving widow to hear. He should have known better. Everyone learned quickly. You don't cross the architect. Marco met Elena Rossi at his cousin's wedding when he was 32 and she was 23. Elena was breathtaking. Not just beautiful, though she was that, with her olive skin, dark cascading hair, and eyes like warm honey. But she had something more: intelligence, wit, a sharp tongue that could cut through Marco's carefully constructed walls. At the wedding reception, Marco approached her with his usual confidence. "Would you like to dance?" Elena looked him up and down with an expression of mild amusement. "Are you asking because you want to dance, or because you're used to people saying yes to you?" Marco was stunned. No one spoke to him like that. "I'm asking because you're the most interesting woman in this room." Flattery. How original. She sipped her wine. "I know who you are, Marco Valentino. The architect, the big scary mob boss. Should I be impressed? Most people are." "I'm not most people." Marco fell in love right there, in that moment, with a woman who saw through his power and didn't flinch. They dated for 2 years. Marco was careful. He kept Elena away from the business, protected her from the violence, created a bubble of normalcy around their relationship. She knew what he did, broadly speaking, but he shielded her from the gruesome details. Elena worked as a gallery director for a contemporary art museum. She was cultured, educated, came from a good family. Her father was a cardiac surgeon, her mother a retired professor of literature. They weren't thrilled about their daughter dating a criminal, but they couldn't deny that Marco treated her like a queen. He proposed on a gondola in Venice, with a 5-carat diamond ring and tears streaming down his face. He told her, "I've done terrible things, but I want to be good for you. I want to build a life with you. Say yes." Elena said yes. They married in a ceremony that cost $2 million, 300 guests, a designer gown, a 12-piece orchestra, politicians and criminals mingling freely, pretending respectability for one perfect evening. Marco remembered standing at the altar watching Elena walk toward him, thinking, "This is it. This is everything. With her, I'm not the architect, I'm just Marco, and that's enough." 3 years into their marriage, Elena surprised Marco with a gift. "I know your security team handles protection," she said, leading him to their garage where a massive black Cane Corso sat calmly. "But I want you to have something more personal. Something that's yours, that loves you, not your money or power." The dog was enormous, 140 pounds of pure muscle. His coat was jet black, his eyes amber and penetrating. He sat perfectly still, radiating quiet power. "His name is Nero," Elena said. "I worked with a specialized trainer for 6 months. He's been trained specifically for executive protection. He'll follow your commands, sleep in your room, stay by your side. But Marco," she paused, her voice serious, "he's also been trained to never bark." Marco raised an eyebrow. "Never bark? Isn't barking kind of the point of a guard dog?" "This isn't a normal guard dog. Nero has been trained to be completely silent. He won't alert intruders to his presence. Won't warn them, he'll just attack if you're threatened, silent and deadly like you." Marco approached the dog slowly. Nero watched him but didn't move. Marco extended his hand and Nero sniffed it, then licked it once. A gesture of acceptance. "He's perfect," Marco said, genuinely touched. "Thank you, Elena. You're always protecting everyone else," she said softly, wrapping her arms around him. "Someone should protect you too." Nero moved into their bedroom that night. He slept at the foot of their bed, a silent sentinel. Within weeks, the dog became Marco's constant companion. Nero accompanied him to the office, to meetings, to restaurants. The massive Cane Corso would lie quietly in the corner, so still that people often forgot he was there. Until they made a threatening move toward Marco. Then Nero would stand, and his sheer presence was enough to make grown men reconsider their life choices. True to his training, Nero never barked, not once. For 7 years, Marco lived in domestic bliss. He and Elena had 2 children, a daughter named Sofia, now 6 years old, and a son named Luca, 4. Marco doted on them with an intensity that surprised everyone, including himself. The man who could order executions without blinking would spend hours playing Tea Party with Sofia or building Lego towers with Luca. "You're going soft," his underboss Frankie Numbers Romano teased him once. Marco smiled. "Maybe, or maybe I finally understand what I'm fighting for." Elena was the perfect Mafia wife. She asked no questions about his business. She hosted dinner parties for his associates with grace and charm. She managed their household staff, planned their social calendar, raised their children with love and discipline. But more than that, she was his confidant, his safe harbor. After a brutal day of negotiations or violence, Marco would come home, and Elena would be there. She'd pour him a drink, massage his shoulders, listen to the parts of his day he could share. "You carry so much weight," she'd whisper. "Let me help you carry it." Their sex life was passionate. Their conversations were deep. Their partnership seemed unshakable. Marco's paranoia, the very trait that had kept him alive in the Mafia, didn't extend to his home. His fortress was impenetrable. Armed guards, surveillance cameras, reinforced doors, panic rooms. But inside that fortress, with Elena and the children and Nero, Marco allowed himself to be vulnerable. He trusted his wife completely. It was the biggest mistake of his life. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday in October. Marco arrived home earlier than expected. A meeting had been canceled. He walked into the house quietly, Nero padding silently beside him as always. He heard Elena's voice from the study. She was on the phone, and something in her tone made him pause. I know. We have to be patient. Just a little longer." A pause. "No, he doesn't suspect anything. He trusts me completely." Another pause, then a soft laugh. "Because I'm that good." Marco felt ice water in his veins. He stepped into the doorway of the study. Elena saw him and didn't flinch, didn't look guilty. She smiled. "Honey, you're home early. I'm just on the phone with the caterer about Sophia's birthday party. The woman is driving me insane with questions about gluten-free options." She held up one finger, "Give me a minute," and continued, "Yes, I understand. Gluten-free, dairy-free, nut-free. No, I get it. Food allergies are serious. Just send me the revised menu." She hung up and kissed Marco on the cheek. "How was your day?" Marco studied her face, searched for deception, found nothing. "Fine. Who were you talking to?" "The caterer. I told you. Why?" "You said he doesn't suspect anything." Elena laughed. "About the surprise entertainment I'm planning. Marco, it's a princess party. I'm hiring actual performers. But if Sophia finds out beforehand, it ruins the magic. Hence the secrecy." It made perfect sense. Marco felt foolish for even questioning it. But something nagged at him, something in Elena's tone, the phrase, "I'm that good." "Of course," he said, forcing a smile. "Sorry, long day. Go shower. I'll make you a drink." That night, lying in bed with Elena asleep beside him and Nero at his feet, Marco couldn't shake the feeling. He replayed the conversation in his mind, analyzing it like he would analyze a business negotiation. He was being paranoid. Elena had given him no reason to doubt her. 7 years of perfect marriage, 2 children, unwavering support. But Marco hadn't survived this long by ignoring his instincts. Marco did something he'd never thought he'd do. He had his wife followed. Not by his own men that would get back to her too easily. He hired an outside private investigation firm, one that specialized in corporate espionage and had no connection to the Mafia. "I need surveillance on someone," he told the PI, a former FBI agent named Richard Chen. "Complete discretion. If anyone finds out, including the subject, our relationship ends and you forget I exist." "Understood. Who's the target?" Marco hesitated. Saying it out loud made it real, made it a betrayal of trust. "My wife." Richard didn't even blink. He'd seen it all. "Suspected infidelity? I don't know what I suspect. That's why I need you." For 2 weeks, Richard and his team followed Elena, photographed her, documented her movements, recorded her phone calls using equipment that was probably illegal, but Marco didn't care. The reports came back clean, too clean. Elena's routine was boringly predictable. Dropping kids at school, morning workout at an exclusive gym, lunch with friends, gallery work, picking up kids, dinner preparation, family time. Occasionally she'd have coffee with her mother or go shopping. Nothing suspicious, nothing unusual, except, "There's something off," Richard told Marco during their final meeting. "Your wife is being followed." Marco's blood ran cold. "By who?" "We don't know." Professional tale. "Very good. We only spotted them because we're professionals ourselves. Black SUV, rotates license plates, at least 3 different drivers. They're surveilling her, but they're careful, they don't get close." "How long?" "Based on our observation, at least the full 2 weeks we've been watching, possibly longer." Marco's mind raced. Someone was watching his wife. Enemies? The FBI? A rival family planning a kidnapping? "Did my wife notice them?" Marco asked. Richard hesitated. "That's the weird part. We can't tell. Sometimes it seems like she's deliberately leading them certain places. Other times, she seems completely oblivious. It's inconsistent." Marco thanked Richard, paid him double the agreed amount, and added a bonus for the team's discretion. Then he went home and watched his wife play with their children, laughing and beautiful and perfect. And he wondered who the hell she really was. 2 weeks after the surveillance report, Elena announced they were hosting a dinner party. "Some of my colleagues from the gallery," she said, "and I invited a few new people I've been networking with. Is that okay?" "Of course," Marco said. He was always supportive of Elena's career. "How many people?" 8, including us. Intimate. I thought it would be nice to do something cultural, something separate from your business world." The dinner party was held on a Saturday. Elena had outdone herself. The table was set with their finest china. Candles created an intimate atmosphere, and the meal was catered by a Michelin-starred restaurant. The guests arrived. 3 couples from the art world and a single man named David Castellano. Marco clocked David immediately. Mid-40s, fit, expensive suit, confident handshake. But there was something about his eyes, the way they scanned the room, the way he positioned himself to have a view of all exits. "David is new to the New York art scene," Elena explained. "He's a collector from Los Angeles, just moved here. I met him at a gallery opening last month. Throughout dinner, Marco watched David, watched how he looked at Elena, watched how Elena looked at him. There was something there, not attraction exactly, but familiarity, like they were playing roles for an audience. "David, what brought you to New York?" Marco asked casually, sipping his wine. "Change of scenery," David said smoothly. Los Angeles was getting stale. New York has more energy, more opportunities. "What kind of opportunities?" "I'm interested in expanding my collection. Elena has been invaluable in introducing me to the right people." Under the table, Nero, who'd been lying quietly at Marco's feet, suddenly stood. The dog's body was tense. His eyes were fixed on David. But he didn't bark. He never barked. Elena noticed. "Nero, sweetheart, lie down." "David, I'm sorry." Nero is usually perfectly behaved. "It's fine," David said, but his eyes met Nero's for just a moment. Something passed between them. Recognition? No, that was impossible. The rest of the dinner passed without incident. The guests left around midnight, praising Elena's hospitality. After everyone had gone and the catering staff had cleaned up, Marco and Elena prepared for bed. Nero followed them upstairs, as always. "That was lovely," Elena said, removing her earrings. "Thank you for being such a gracious host." "David seems interesting," Marco said carefully. "Isn't he? Very knowledgeable about contemporary art. I think he'll be a great asset to the museum's donor network." Marco wanted to ask more, wanted to question, but he had no evidence of anything wrong, just a feeling. That night, as Elena slept peacefully beside him, Marco lay awake. Nero was restless too. The dog kept standing, sitting, standing again. His eyes were fixed on the bedroom door, like he was waiting for something. Marco started digging into David Castellano's background. What he found disturbed him. David Castellano existed on paper. He had a driver's license, credit cards, a passport, but the identity was only 3 years old. Before that, David Castellano didn't exist. Marco called in a favor from a hacker on his payroll. "I need everything on this guy. Everything." The hacker, known only as Ghost, worked for 48 hours straight. What he uncovered made Marco's blood run cold. David Castellano was a cover identity. The real person was David Kostov, former Russian military intelligence, now working as a freelance operative. His specialty? Corporate espionage and high-level blackmail. And he'd been in New York for exactly 6 months. The same amount of time the surveillance team had noticed people following Elena. Marco's paranoia kicked into overdrive. Was Elena being targeted? Was she a pawn in some scheme against him? Or was she part of it? He confronted her that evening, casually, carefully. "I ran into an old friend who knows some art collectors in LA, Marco lied. He'd never heard of David Castellano. Strange, right? For someone who claims to be a major collector? Elena didn't miss a beat. The art world is vast, honey. Not everyone knows everyone. And David is relatively new to serious collecting. He made his money in tech, I think. Or was it finance? I don't remember." "You don't remember how your new friend made his money?" "Marco, I network with dozens of people. I can't remember everyone's life story. Why are you asking?" "Just curious." But Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're investigating him, aren't you?" "My God, Marco. Can't I have friends without you running background checks?" "I run background checks on everyone who comes into our home. You know this. It's not personal." "It feels personal." She turned away, her voice hurt. "I work so hard to build a life separate from your world, to have something that's mine, and you can't even let me have that." Guilt crashed over Marco. She was right. He was being paranoid, controlling. He was letting his criminal mindset poison his marriage. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling her into his arms. "You're right, I'm being ridiculous. Forgive me?" Elena softened. "Of course. I know your world makes you suspicious. But baby, I'm not part of that world. I'm just your wife. I love you. I love you too." They made love that night, passionate, intense. Afterward, as Elena slept, Marco lay awake. Nero was staring at Elena. The dog had never done that before, never focused on Elena with such intensity. Marco quietly got out of bed and went to his study. He pulled up the surveillance files Richard had sent him, studied every photo, every timestamp, and then he saw it. In one photo, taken outside a coffee shop, Elena was sitting at an outdoor table. In the background, barely visible, was David Castellano, not sitting with her, but watching her from across the street. This photo was taken 3 weeks before the dinner party, before Elena claimed to have met David at a gallery opening last month. They'd known each other longer than Elena admitted. Marco felt sick. Pause. Are you still with me? I need to stop for just a moment because this is getting intense. Your heart is probably racing right now. You're wondering if Elena is betraying Marco, if David is part of some plot, if Nero knows something we don't. If you're invested in this story, if you need to know what happens next, then hit that subscribe button right now. Smash that like button. Because this story is about to take turns so devastating, so shocking, that you'll be talking about it for weeks. We're at the midpoint. The betrayal is about to unfold. And I promise you, it's worse than you think. Now let's return to Marco's nightmare, because everything he thought he knew is about to shatter. Marco became meticulous in his surveillance. He installed hidden cameras in his own home, something he'd never thought he'd need to do. He had ghost monitor Elena's phone, her emails, her every digital footprint. For 2 weeks, he found nothing. Elena was either innocent or impossibly careful. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, Ghost called. "Boss, you need to see this. Encrypted email, routed through multiple servers. She's good, but I'm better." The email was from Elena to an address that couldn't be traced. The message was brief. Timeline moved up. He's suspicious. We proceed next Tuesday. Confirm David is ready. Marco read it 3 times. His hands shook. His wife, his Elena, the mother of his children, the woman he'd built his entire world around. She was betraying him. He wanted to confront her immediately, wanted to rage, to demand answers. But the architect didn't act on emotion. He planned. Marco called a meeting with his most trusted men, Frankie Numbers Romano, his underboss, and Sal the Hammer Moretti, his head of security. "I have a situation," Marco said, and told them everything. Frankie's face went white. "Boss, this could be a setup. Someone could be framing Elena. With what motive? To make you doubt her. To destabilize you. You're stronger with her. Everyone knows that." Marco wanted to believe it. God, how he wanted to believe it. "Or," Sal said carefully, "she could actually be setting you up. Boss, I hate to say it, but have you considered what she stands to gain if you die?" Marco had. "She gets everything. Life insurance, my assets, custody of the kids, but also she'd be a widow in the Mafia world. Targeted. Vulnerable. Unless she's made a deal," Sal continued, "with the feds or with a rival family. Turn on you, testify, get immunity and witness protection." It made horrible sense. "What do you want us to do, boss?" Frankie asked. Marco thought carefully. "Nothing yet. I want to know what happens Tuesday, what they're planning. Then we act." Tuesday came. Marco told Elena he had a late meeting. "Don't wait up. I might not be home until after midnight." "Okay, baby, be safe." She kissed him, sweet and loving. Marco left with Nero, drove 3 blocks, then circled back. He parked down the street from his own house and watched through a tablet connected to his hidden cameras. At 9 p.m., a car pulled into his driveway. David Castellano. Elena answered the door. They didn't embrace. Didn't kiss. This wasn't an affair. It was business. They went into Marco's study, the one room he hadn't put cameras in because he'd thought it was his sanctuary. But he had audio. "Is it ready?" Elena's voice. "Everything's in place. He'll never see it coming." David's voice. "You're sure the poison is untraceable?" Marco's blood turned to ice. "Completely. He'll have what appears to be a massive heart attack. Given his stress levels and family history, no one will question it. You'll be the grieving widow. And then you inherit everything. Once you have control of his assets, you transfer the agreed amount to our accounts. You get your freedom and enough money to live comfortably. We get paid. Everyone wins. Except Marco." A pause. Then Elena laughed. It was a sound Marco had never heard from her. Cold, calculating. "Except Marco. You really hate him, don't you?" "Hate?" Elena's voice was thoughtful. "No, I don't hate him. I just never loved him. He was a means to an end. A very lucrative end." Marco felt his heart shattering. 7 years. 2 children. It had all been a lie. "When?" David asked. "Tomorrow night. I'll put it in his nighttime tea. He always drinks chamomile before bed. By morning, he'll be dead, and I'll be a rich widow." Marco had heard enough. He drove away, Nero silent in the passenger seat. At a red light, Marco looked at his dog. "You knew, didn't you? You sensed something wrong with her." Nero stared back with those amber eyes. "Why didn't you bark? Why didn't you warn me?" But of course, Nero couldn't bark. He'd been trained never to bark. Trained by Elena. The realization hit Marco like a physical blow. Elena had given him Nero. Elena had specifically requested a dog that would never bark. Silent when intruders came, silent when danger approached. It was the perfect setup. Marco had thought Nero's silence made him deadly. Instead, it made him useless as an early warning system. Elena had neutered his protection from the very beginning. Marco didn't go home that night. He went to a safe house. He maintained a luxury apartment in Tribeca that no one, not even Elena, knew about. He called Frankie and Sal, told them everything he'd heard. "We kill her," Sal said immediately, "and we kill David, tonight." "No," Marco said, his voice dead. "I want her to think she's winning. I want her to believe right up until the last moment that her plan worked. Boss, she's trying to poison you tomorrow night. I know, so I won't drink the tea, but she'll think I did." Marco outlined his plan. It was risky, it required perfect timing, but if it worked, Elena would face something worse than death. She'd face the truth of what she'd done. Wednesday evening, Marco came home at his usual time. He was exhausted, purposefully so. He'd been up all night planning, and the fatigue showed. "Rough day?" Elena asked, concern in her voice. She was so good at the performance. "Brutal. I need to sleep for about 12 hours. Go shower, I'll make your tea." Marco showered, put on his pajamas, and waited. Elena brought him the chamomile tea in his favorite mug. She even added honey, the way he liked it. "Drink up," she said, kissing his forehead. "You need your rest." Marco raised the mug to his lips. Let the steam warm his face. Then, while Elena was turned away, he poured the entire cup into a vase of flowers on his nightstand. The flowers would be dead by morning. Marco would not. He lay down in bed. Elena curled up beside him, her head on his chest. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Marco said. The last lie he'd ever tell her. Within 30 minutes, Marco began his performance. He pretended to struggle to breathe, clutched his chest. "Marco? Marco?" Elena's voice perfectly panicked. "Oh my God, Marco." She grabbed her phone. Called 911. "My husband, he's having a heart attack. Please, send an ambulance." Marco watched her through half-closed eyes. She was magnificent. The concerned wife, the terror, the tears. All fake. The ambulance arrived within 8 minutes. Paramedics rushed in. They loaded Marco onto a stretcher. As they wheeled him out, Marco saw Elena standing in the doorway, phone to her ear, calling David probably, telling him phase 1 was complete. But Marco had one more card to play, Nero. The dog had been quiet throughout the entire scene, silent as always. But now, as the paramedics prepared to close the ambulance doors, Nero did something he'd never done before. He barked, one sharp, piercing bark that echoed through the night. Elena spun around, shocked. She stared at the dog. Nero barked again, and again, and again. Not at the paramedics. Not at the neighbors gathering outside. At Elena. The dog's message was clear, even if no one else understood it. "I know what you did." Marco was taken to Mount Sinai Hospital. The emergency room doctors ran tests, hooked him up to monitors, examined him thoroughly, and found nothing wrong. "Mr. Valentino, your heart is fine," the attending physician said, confused. "Whatever you experienced wasn't a heart attack. Maybe a panic attack? Severe stress reaction?" "Maybe," Marco said weakly. "Can I go home?" "We'd like to keep you overnight for observation." "Fine." What the doctor didn't know was that Marco owned this hospital, not officially, but through a web of donations and board appointments. The physician treating him was on Marco's payroll. In his private hospital room, Marco made calls. First, to Ghost. "I need you to access every digital communication Elena has made in the past year. Everything. I want to know when this started." Second, to Frankie. "Bring David Castellano to the warehouse, alive. I want to talk to him." Third, to his lawyer. "I need divorce papers drawn up. And I need Elena's access to all accounts frozen. Immediately." Finally, to Sal. "Take Nero to the safe house. Keep him protected. He's the only one who tried to warn me." That night, while Elena thought her husband was dying in a hospital bed, Marco was building his case. David Castellano was grabbed outside his apartment at 2 a.m. Frankie's team was efficient, no witnesses, no struggle, just a quiet abduction. They brought him to one of Marco's warehouses in Red Hook, a place where many people had died over the years. Marco arrived at 4 a.m. David was tied to a chair, bruised but alive. Mr. Valentino, David said, trying for confidence. There's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I heard everything. The poison, the plan, my wife trying to kill me for my money. David's face went pale. Here's what's going to happen, Marco said, his voice calm, too calm. You're going to tell me everything. When this started, who else is involved? What Elena promised you. And if you lie even once, my associate here, he gestured to Sal, who was holding a pair of bolt cutters, is going to start removing fingers. David talked. He talked for 3 hours. The truth was worse than Marco had imagined. Elena had been planning this for 5 years, almost from the beginning of their marriage. She'd never loved Marco. She'd targeted him specifically because he was rich, powerful, and paranoid enough to trust very few people. If she could become the one person he trusted completely, she could eventually destroy him from the inside. David was part of a crew that specialized in this exact con. They'd done it before to a tech billionaire in San Francisco, to an oil executive in Houston, to a hedge fund manager in London. Beautiful women would marry wealthy men, wait until they were firmly established in the will, then arrange accidents. How much has she done this before? Marco asked, his voice hollow. You're number 4, David said. The other 3 were car accidents, a drowning, and a home invasion gone wrong. All ruled accidental or random. Elena is very, very good. And my children? David hesitated. They're not yours. The room spun. What? Elena was already pregnant when she met you. Different father. She timed it perfectly so you'd think Sophia was yours. Luca actually is yours, but she told me she only had the second kid to make herself seem more legitimate. More devoted. Marco thought he might vomit. Where's the real father? Dead. Elena killed him too. Made it look like a mugging. He didn't have much money, but he was her first practice run. Marco stood there, processing. His entire marriage, his family, his life. All of it was a carefully constructed fraud. Please, David said. I'll testify. I'll tell the police everything, just don't kill me. Marco looked at him for a long moment. I'm not going to kill you. That would be too easy. No, you're going to do exactly what you said. You're going to testify. You're going to tell everyone what Elena did. And then you're going to prison for conspiracy to commit murder. He turned to Frankie. Call our contact at the FBI. Tell him we have a gift. Marco returned home the next morning. The doctors had released him, declaring him healthy. Elena was waiting, looking exhausted and worried. A perfect performance. Oh, thank God, she said, embracing him. They said you're okay? That it wasn't a heart attack? Just stress, Marco said. You know how it is. You need to take better care of yourself. You scared me to death. Marco looked at her. Really looked at her. Trying to see the monster beneath the beauty. Where's Nero? Elena asked, looking around. I left him with Sal for a few days. After last night I thought he seemed stressed. All that barking. That was so strange, Elena said. He's never barked before. Maybe he sensed something was wrong with you? Maybe. They had breakfast together, played with the children. Everything seemed normal. Except nothing would ever be normal again. That evening after the kids were in bed, Marco said, we should talk. About what? About us. About our marriage. About the truth. Elena's face showed concern. Marco, you're worrying me. What's wrong? I know, Elena. Know what? Everything. David Castellano. The poison in the tea. The whole plan. For just a moment, less than a second, Elena's mask slipped. Marco saw the calculation behind her eyes. Then the mask was back. I don't know what you're talking about. David is just a friend from the gallery. And poison? Marco, did you hit your head? Should we go back to the hospital? Stop, just stop. Marco's voice was tired. I have recordings, video. David's full confession. The FBI has him in custody right now. It's over. Elena stared at him. Then slowly, gradually, her expression changed. The loving wife disappeared. What replaced her was cold, empty. A stranger. How long have you known? She asked, her voice completely different, harder, no warmth. Long enough to protect myself, to protect my assets, to make sure you get nothing. Elena laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, Marco, you really think you've won? You tried to kill me. You married me under false pretenses. You committed fraud, conspiracy to commit murder. You're going to prison. Am I? Let's think about this. Your only evidence is recordings from illegal surveillance in your own home. Inadmissible. David's testimony? He's a criminal with a record. His word against mine. And I'm the victim here, the innocent wife whose paranoid mob boss husband has clearly lost his mind. She stood up, pacing. You forget, Marco. I've been planning this for 5 years. I've documented every moment of your controlling behavior, your jealousy, your paranoia. I have therapy records showing how stressed I've been. Friends who'll testify that you isolated me, that I was afraid of you. Marco felt sick. She'd planned for this contingency too. And the children? Elena continued. You think a court is going to give custody to a known mafia boss over their devoted mother? Even if Sofia isn't biologically yours, you're on the birth certificate. You've raised her as your daughter. Try to take her away. And I'll make sure every news outlet knows that Marco, the architect Valentino, is trying to kidnap a child. You're insane. No, I'm smart. Smarter than you. You thought you could control everything, plan for everything. But you didn't plan for the one person who got close enough to destroy you. Marco's hand moved to his pocket. He had a gun there. It would be so easy. Go ahead, Elena said, seeing the movement. Shoot me. Kill me in our home where our children sleep upstairs. Prove to everyone that you're exactly the monster everyone says you are. Marco's hand stopped. Elena smiled. That's what I thought. You're weak, Marco. You always have been. You hide it under all that power and fear, but deep down, you're just a little boy who wanted to be loved. And I used that. It was almost too easy. Why? Marco asked, his voice breaking. Why do this? Why not just marry someone rich legally? Why the murder, the cruelty? Because I can, Elena said simply. Because men like you, with all your power and money, you think you're untouchable. You think you can do whatever you want. Someone needs to remind you that you're not special, that you're just as vulnerable as everyone else. And I'm very good at delivering that reminder. She walked toward the door. I'm going to my mother's for a few days. With the children. You know, until you calm down from your episode, I'd suggest you get a good lawyer. You're going to need one. Elena left. Marco stood alone in his house, his perfect life demolished around him. Then he heard it. Barking. Nero was at the door, Sal standing behind him. The dog had somehow escaped and come home. Nero ran to Marco and pressed against his leg, whimpering, still barking, finally using his voice after 7 years of silence. Marco sank to the floor and held the dog. You tried to warn me, he whispered. Even when you couldn't speak, you tried. Nero licked his face. It was the only real love Marco had left. The next 6 months were hell. Elena filed for divorce and full custody. She painted herself as the victim of an abusive, controlling mob boss. Her lawyers were excellent, paid for with money from her previous cons, no doubt. Marco's lawyers were better. They couldn't use the illegal recordings in court, but they could use David's testimony. The FBI had offered him a deal 15 years instead of life, in exchange for complete cooperation. David testified that Elena had approached him to help murder her husband. He provided emails, text messages, financial records showing payments. He detailed her previous marriages and the suspicious deaths of her former husbands. Elena's defense? David was a jealous ex-lover making up stories to hurt her. It was her word against his. The trial became a media sensation. The mob boss versus his beautiful wife. Who was the real victim? Public opinion was split. Then Marco's lawyers found something Elena hadn't anticipated. The first husband, the one Elena claimed, had died in a mugging. Marco's team exhumed the body. The mugging victim had been poisoned, the same untraceable poison that David had described. The medical examiner had missed it in the original autopsy, but new tests revealed the truth. Elena had killed before. The hardest part wasn't the trial, it was the children. Sofia, now 7, didn't understand why Mommy and Daddy weren't living together, why Daddy looked so sad all the time. Luca, at 5, kept asking when Mommy was coming home. Marco had to make a choice. Tell them the truth about their mother, or protect their innocence. He chose protection. Mommy and Daddy need some time apart, he told them gently, but we both still love you very, very much. DNA tests confirmed that Sofia wasn't his biological daughter. But Marco didn't care. He'd raised her. He loved her. She was his daughter in every way that mattered. Elena tried to use the DNA results against him in court. He's not even her real father. Why should he get custody? But Marco's lawyers had a response. If DNA is what matters, then Elena should explain why she lied to Mr. Valentino about Sofia's paternity for 7 years. If DNA matters, then fraud matters. You can't have it both ways. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Morrison, saw through Elena's manipulation. Mrs. Valentino, or whatever your real name is, you've committed fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and quite possibly multiple homicides. You're going to prison. The question is for how long? The trial lasted 4 months. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, Elena showed no emotion. She sat perfectly still, perfectly composed. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. On the count of attempted murder, guilty. On the count of fraud, guilty. Guilty on 17 counts total. The sentencing hearing was 2 weeks later. Judge Morrison looked at Elena with disgust. Mrs. Valentino, I've been a judge for 27 years. I've seen every kind of criminal. But you're something special. You weaponized love. You turned the most intimate human relationship into a tool for murder and theft. She paused. You preyed on men's desire for companionship, their hope for family, their capacity for trust, and you used those beautiful human qualities to destroy them. Your previous husbands can't speak for themselves, but Mr. Valentino survived, and thanks to his testimony and the evidence his team uncovered, we now know the truth about you. Elena remained expressionless. I'm sentencing you to life in prison without possibility of parole. You'll have plenty of time to think about the lives you've destroyed. Elena was led away. She never looked back, never showed remorse. As she passed Marco in the courtroom, she whispered just loud enough for him to hear. You think you won, but you'll never trust anyone again. I made sure of that. You'll die alone, Marco, just like I planned. Then she was gone. Marco won full custody of both children. Sofia and Luca would be raised knowing their mother was in prison, but not knowing the full truth until they were old enough to understand. He sold the house where he'd lived with Elena. Too many memories, too much betrayal soaked into the walls. He bought a new place, smaller, cozier, a home, not a fortress. Nero came with him. The dog that had tried to warn him. The dog that had finally broken his silence when it mattered most. Marco had Nero examined by veterinary behaviorists. They were fascinated by the case. Dogs can sense changes in human behavior, one expert explained. Stress hormones, micro-expressions, subtle changes in routine. Your dog probably sensed something off about your wife long before you did. But because he was trained never to bark, he couldn't warn you in the usual way. But he barked that night. Why? Because the danger was immediate. Because his training to protect you overrode his training to be silent. In that moment, saving you was more important than following rules. Marco thought about that a lot. How even with training, even with conditioning, Nero's essential nature, his loyalty, had broken through. Marco stepped back from the Mafia. Not completely, he was still the architect, still controlled his empire, but he delegated more, spent more time with his children, went to their school plays and soccer games and parent-teacher conferences. He went to therapy, a real therapist, not one on his payroll, someone who could help him process the betrayal. Trust isn't about being naive, the therapist told him. It's about choosing to be vulnerable despite the risk. What Elena did was unforgivable. But if you let her destroy your ability to trust, then she wins even from prison. It took time. Years. Sofia grew up smart and strong. She knew her mother was in prison but didn't know all the details. Marco would tell her someday, when she was ready. Luca was more affected. He'd been young enough when Elena left that his memories of her were vague. Marco became his whole world. And Nero remained their constant companion. The dog lived to be 14, a good long life for a Cane Corso. When he finally passed away, peacefully in his sleep, Marco buried him in their backyard with a headstone that read, Nero, the dog who finally barked when it mattered most, loyal, brave, loved. 5 years after Elena's conviction, Marco received a letter from prison. From Elena? He almost threw it away, almost burned it, but curiosity won. The letter read, Marco, I'm writing this because my lawyer says I should try for an appeal. Show remorse. Act reformed. But I'm not going to lie to you. Not anymore. I'm not sorry. I did what I did because I could, because I was good at it, because men like you, with all your power and money, you're still just men. Vulnerable, desperate for love, easy to manipulate. You want to know if any of it was real? If I felt anything for you? Sometimes. In small moments. When you played with Sofia. When you'd wake up from nightmares and hold me close. When you'd tell me your fears. In those moments I almost felt something like affection, like guilt. Almost. But it was never enough to stop me. Because the game was too good. The con was too perfect. And you were so easy to fool. You think Nero saved you that night? You're wrong, I saved you. I could have used a poison that killed instantly. Could have made it look like a stroke, an accident, anything. But I chose a slow-acting poison. Gave you time. Because some part of me, the part I usually silence, wanted you to have a chance. I'll never admit that in court. Never tell my lawyer. But I'm telling you. You survived because I let you survive. And now I'm going to spend the rest of my life in here, thinking about the one Mark who got away. I hope you're happy, Marco. I hope your kids grow up healthy. I hope you find someone who actually loves you, though I doubt you'll ever trust anyone again. That's my real victory. Not your death, your isolation. You're welcome, Elena. Marco read the letter 3 times. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. Because Elena was wrong. He had found love. Not romantic love, he wasn't ready for that and might never be. But love nonetheless. The love of his children. The love of true friends like Frankie who'd stood by him. The love of Nero who'd given everything to protect him. And he'd learned to love himself. The real Marco. Not the architect, not the mob boss. Just a man who'd survived betrayal and chosen to keep living. He wrote back, Elena, thank you for your honesty. You're right about a lot of things. I was vulnerable. I did trust too easily. And yes, you almost destroyed me. But you didn't. I survived. My children are thriving. My life has meaning beyond money and power. You wanted to isolate me, to make me unable to trust. But you gave me something else instead. Clarity. I know now what real loyalty looks like. It looks like a dog who breaks years of training to bark a warning. It looks like friends who help you when you're at your lowest. It looks like children who love you despite everything. You didn't win, Elena. You didn't even come close. Enjoy prison. Marco. He never heard from her again. Marco Valentino stood in his backyard, watching his teenage children play with their new dog, a German shepherd puppy named Luna. Sophia was 16 now, beautiful and fierce. She knew the truth about her mother. Marco had told her on her 14th birthday, when she'd asked why she never got to visit Mommy in prison. She'd cried, raged, gone through all the stages of grief. But eventually she'd said, she's not my mom, not really, you're my dad. That's what matters. Luca, at 14, was quieter, more thoughtful. He'd taken the news about Elena harder, but he'd also been younger when she left. His memories of her were fewer. Both kids were good, kind. Despite everything, Marco had raised them well. He'd never remarried, never even dated seriously. The scars from Elena ran too deep, but he wasn't alone. He had his children, his work, his friends, his life. And he'd learned the most important lesson of all. Trust carefully, but don't stop trusting. Because the alternative, Elena's isolation, her emptiness, was a prison worse than the one she lived in. As the sun set over New York City, Marco called his kids inside for dinner. Luna barked happily, running in circles. Marco smiled. Sometimes barking was good. Sometimes breaking silence saved lives. And sometimes surviving betrayal was its own form of victory. So there you have it. The story of a mafia boss whose perfect life was built on lies. Whose wife was a serial killer. Whose only warning came from a dog who'd been trained never to bark. Now I want to hear from you, in the comments, right now. What did you think of this story? Were you shocked by Elena's betrayal? Did you see it coming? What would you have done in Marco's situation? Tell me your thoughts, share your reactions. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? How did you survive it? And if this story moved you, if it made you angry, sad, shocked, or gave you trust issues, then you need to do something for me right now. Subscribe to this channel. Hit that subscribe button. Ring the notification bell. Because I bring you stories like this every single day. Stories that will mess with your head in the best way possible. Stories you'll think about for weeks. Like this video. Comment below with your thoughts. Share it with someone who needs to hear that even the worst betrayals can be survived. Tell me where you're watching from. New York? Tokyo? London? Lagos? I want to know who took this journey with me. Marco Valentino survived because he paid attention to the warning signs, because he trusted his instincts, and because when his dog finally broke its silence, he listened. What warnings are you ignoring in your own life? What silences are trying to tell you something? Subscribe, like, comment, share. And remember, trust carefully, but don't stop trusting, because isolation is its own kind of death. See you in the next story. Until then, pay attention to the warnings, even when they come from the most unexpected sources. Especially when they come from the most unexpected sources.